Hi, everyone. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to Conrad as well. My name's Pugh. I'm just very grateful I'm not wearing that jacket and that shirt. I did that once at a conference, which was a bit awkward. And today we're going to have a great panel where we're going to focus on some of the topics and themes that we've heard so far. So I'd like to invite the panelists to take the stage. So I think it all conveniently sat right in the front of your row here. So I'd like to come up. Okay, while we're doing that, as Conrad mentioned, Rich mentioned, my name is Rich Pugh. I'm Chief Data Scientist at Ascent. So my background is really kind of data science, understanding, I guess, how we apply AI, data, et cetera, to create new business models. And the panel today is really going to be focused on some of the themes that we've heard so far. I think some of the kind of like, how do we actually go about adopting some of these innovative capabilities? I think we've heard themes around pace. So how do we do that at pace? We've heard about the horizon of strategy. How do we actually look forward? And so on. So that's what we'll get into today. So before we start, I'd like to ask my panelists to introduce themselves and maybe talk a bit about their role in evolving your organizations. And so maybe we start with you. Yeah, let's go in order, yeah.
Does it work? Yeah. Okay. Very nice meeting you and being here. Thanks, Rick. Stefano, Bison. I take care of business development, partnership, and innovation in Generali at group level. I've been around the insurance industry for 10 years, and 10 years earlier, I was following banks. So, in all honesty, I'm seeing some similarities of what have happened a few years ago.
Hello. Once again, my name is Sirma. I work for Allianz. I'm a member of the management board of Allianz Group, and as I was introduced before this, I'm in charge for Southern Western Europe, which is France, Italy, Benelux, Greece, and Turkey, and two of our global entities, Allianz Partners and Allianz Direct. And I strongly believe that my role is about supporting and protecting the great legacy Allianz has, but also making sure that we are prepared for the future and innovate with the help of a strong moral compass. Very happy to be here today.
So my name is Alexander. I'm passionately believing that there is big value in connecting business and technology, particularly in insurance. And that probably brought me to my current role because I'm the Group Chief Operating Officer of AXA and also a member of the Management Committee. And in that capacity, also leading all our subsidiaries on technology and operations within the AXA Group.
And I'm Mathieu. I'm the Belgian in the room. Any other Belgian? Maybe, no, not sure. So I'm working for Zurich Insurance. I work part of my career in consulting, management consulting. Then I moved to Zurich in Switzerland, working for the group, building digital services. And since 2 years, I moved as a CEO for the French entity in Paris, so Zurich Insurance France, where I had governance, facility, strategy and digital, of course digital, and one of the hats is actually to accelerate digital in the French entity, in the French branch.
Great, thank you. As you can see, an incredible panel this morning. So before we start, I just want to point out that we're going to speak for about 40 minutes, something like that. During that time, we'll have a discussion here, but you can also ask questions. You can do that in the Brella app, I've been told. Top left-hand corner, there's a button that gets you to the Q&A section that allows you to ask questions. I think there might be microphones in the room later as well. We've had two great conversations and discussions this morning already and presentations. And so I think that what we're going to try and pick up on here is just the practicalities, the adoption of these innovative capabilities in an environment that is rapidly evolving, changing, etc. I think, Sirma, you talked about, how do you set a strategy for X years, given that, what's going to happen next week, next month, etc. It's quite a challenging time. So I imagine factors around the pace of change, prioritization of investment, and managing that impact and that change will come up. So maybe just to start off with then, there's clearly, from the two presentations so far, there's clearly a lot of work for us to do. And if we think about that kind of pace of change right now, with such a fast-moving environment out there, do you think that insurance in general is nimble enough, is agile enough to be able to react quickly in order to seize some of these opportunities? I don't know who wants to start with that.
Well, I can start. I think the insurance, well, historically, I think the insurance industry has been very slow to act or react or go with the pace of change. In Zurich, France, we are busy with commercial insurance, so commercial insurance has been even slower. But we're getting there. I think the awareness is there. We do push forward. We do a lot of things locally. So if I take like maybe three actions we do, is really like building agile pockets of agile teams within the department to build solutions, to build quickly solutions for the business. So that's one way to cope with the pace of change with the new technologies. That works quite well from a tactical standpoint. We work also with InsurTech in France. We do engage with them and try to build some use case with them so that it really fits our purpose. So we can't talk globally. We talk like in that department, that process, we want to have that use case. And then it's kind of a make or break. So we invite the InsurTech, they show the use case. They really do a showcase of their solutions, and it's a go or no go. And then globally in Zurich Insurance, we also do the Zurich Innovation Championship, where we involve, I think there were like 3,500 submissions this year with InsurTech, helping us to develop solutions around digital customer experience, and also distribution. So kind of three actions that help us to keep pace with that technology and with the changes.
Can I agree and disagree with the Belgian? No? Because of course this is a panel of insurers. No, I mean we are the incumbents, so you cannot expect too much of let's say criticism on ourselves. At the same time, I don't want to be too self-complacent. So the answer to your question is: are we quick enough? No. But just to take a bit of a contrarian view, no, does it matter? Probably neither. The point is, and I think Sirma said it perfectly during her keynote, we're not quick, and there's many reasons for which we're not quick. The first one is it's a business of trust. I think you said it very well, and it doesn't really matter of being the first in the market. It does if you're wrong. I mean, it's like, no, my team always tell me it's more important to do it well than quick. And we are the innovation team, no? So imagine the rest of the company. But jokes apart, this is really like a long-term game. I think what the other keynote was telling us now regarding the prediction of the future is also something about, you know, the effect of the decision you take today will show up in your balance sheet in 1 year at best, if not, if you think about the life, you know, in maybe 10, 20 years. So whatever you do really needs to be thought well. There's a lot about customer protection that needs to be done. There's a lot about the moral impacts of what you do. Think about, you know, all these new data sources, IoT, etc. You can be so good in pricing that you kill the mutualization, which is one of the bases on which the insurance industry is living. So is it right? I mean, you can do it, but is it right? So all this is supporting the fact that we're not quick. Of course, regulators built, you know, a number of legacy layers on top of this. We reacted with operation and processes that translated in legacy IT, and all this is like, you know, running with weights on your ankles. So we're not quick. That's the truth. And last but not least, and I'm a big believer of you know, incentive economies. I mean, our day-to-day and our balanced scorecards and everything else, because you know we are owned by investors that don't ask us to be quick. They typically, and I'm thinking about the panel here, they invest in us because they want a value stock. And you know, they want us to survive, in the case of Generali, for another 191 years, hopefully. So all this considered means that, and I don't want to take too much time, sorry for this, but it makes sense to do things really properly and think well through what you're doing. But there's people out there, and I'm going back to Mathieu, that are living instead for changing. And that's the point on incentives. InsurTechs, they do live to make new things happen tomorrow. I mean, they wake up in the morning and that's the only thing they think about. So how do we become quicker we need to work more with InsurTech. I totally agree with what has been said regarding going meta and the platform and opening up the ecosystem, because we're not quick, and there's good reasons for that. I hope it's clear and shared. And if we want to get quicker, we need to start running with those that are much quicker than us for other reasons.
Great, thanks, Stefano. Alexander?
Yeah, yet another maybe perspective from the incumbent panel here, and we thought we should have a bit of fun. But I think actually we are in many instances, everyone in this industry tries to be agile. Are we really agile from end to end? I would doubt that, right? But I mean, we are on the movement and trying to do many things, right? The same is on innovation. Are we innovative? Yes, we have a lot of stuff where I think really probably all of our companies have really great stuff when it comes to innovation. At the same time, there are a couple of very fundamental problems that prevent us from scaling fast enough. And if you ask me, it is not so much a question of are we having the right target picture or vision or not, because I think honestly a lot was said this morning that everybody can subscribe, and being fast enough to address really your customers appealed to me, what the Google guy said, because on the one hand, insurance customers do not necessarily act that fast in the way they change, which protects us to some extent. But at the same time, I think we also still a lot to do, particularly when it comes to our legacy technology, to clean that up, to fully unlock the value of scalability. And if you ask me today what's my biggest problem, I think it is really about making sure that we're able to scale everything that we already know. Not that we would try to learn a lot of new things. I mean, we learn as we go, every one of us, right? So the last couple of months have been really exciting in that regard. But to me, there is always a question, okay, so I understand, and we can do some POCs and whatever, but how do we scale it up? How do we make it relevant for our daily business and for all of our customers?
I mean, if you allow me, at the end of the day, it's a question of balance, right? We always need to keep the right balance in terms of what we are doing and how we are doing. And we have certain areas that we need to be faster, and we are moving fast, like customer service and etc. Last week, I was visiting our IT hub of Allianz Direct, and they're extremely agile, and they're cool, they're young, they're just moving every day, they're doing releases and etc. On the other hand, I'm a bit keen on whether we need to be too fast in terms of risk-taking or data protection, because these are areas that we really need to look at a very careful manner in order also to safeguard our customers and also our shareholders. So for me, it's always about balance and about making sure that we are staying relevant with the right tools in our pockets.
And if I just may, I totally agree there. And I think it's also, we have discussed it now, it's also about the customer in the end, and we, in commercial insurance, you offer contracts that are tailor-made to a customer. They want a private relationship or one-to-one relationships. So that's something you cannot automate or digitalize, right? So you need to keep that, that balance indeed with the customer, with the pace, with the governance. What do you do with the data? Although I think there is some areas where you can go fast locally in a business unit or in a country, and some things you need to step back and say, hey, hold on a second, what are we doing here? So there's really like two sides of the thing. That's why I was saying we're getting there, because in some areas we're definitely getting there in using those digital tools, low-code platforms, all these things. But in some area we're stepping back because we need to reflect and see what is the real impact on it.
So, I mean, if I completely take the points about being sort of right-paced, right? Being at the right pace, doing the right things. I think the challenge in a lot of industries, not just insurance at times, is that we don't own the pace. The pace is given to us by changing customer perceptions or disruptive influences and so on. I think that's kind of where being able to understand the pace of change that you need to be able to achieve becomes so important, right? And I completely see that. In terms of, I want to kind of pick up on something else that was kind of mentioned earlier. I think this was also in your talk, Sirma, which was around the kind of moral aspects and the kind of sustainable agenda, if you like, the goals there. So we talked about mindfulness and so on. I'm just wondering how in your organizations are you able to balance those kind of, I guess, moral aspects of your strategy versus the kind of commercial aspects? Because I've been in organizations where those feel misaligned, or at least in terms of different personalities may see that differently. I'm just wondering, how do you actually build that, I guess, into your core objective so that you can really drive towards the right place? Does that make sense? I'm not sure who wants to pick up on that.
Of course, I think that's super important, and in many aspects, right? When it comes to technology, obviously the question of how are we applying technology in a responsible way, and that's why, I mean, in our case, for instance, all new AIs run through how we call it, our responsible AI circle, where we really try to understand what are the implications, and we're working a lot also with many institutions around this world to understand what does an AI make responsible and not. And I mean, we all have seen over the last couple of days that particularly in Europe there is an increasing discussion around the regulatory environment under which large language models, for instance, should work or not work. So I think that's super important. And the second is, indeed, there should be a couple of guiding principles, and it's our own interest to formulate them very clearly. One of them is the data belong to the customer. So the customer needs to know what we know about him and how we are using the data, and also how we're using the data for him. And honestly, there are many, many use cases where we can really make a difference for the customer, but at the same time, I think it has a lot to do with our moral compass, what we do, for instance, on the other hand, when it comes to risk selection. And I think that goes very, very deeply and very fundamentally to the question of what insurance is all about, because we have a noble purpose. We are protecting society, we are protecting economy, we are protecting individuals in a very good, in a mutualized way. And if we always think back to our original purpose, I think we have already quite a good compass in our head where we can and where we should go. And that also requires, by the way, to rethink sometimes where we are withdrawing ourselves from risks, although we are in an era, and I share, we are in a golden era of insurance because risk is on the rise, it's not in the reduction. This is our business, so how can we make it controllable? We should not think about how can we reduce our own skin in the game. We should think about how can we increase our skin in the game to make sure that we cover the things that matter for people, because that's where we need to be as insurers. And I think everything that goes in the wrong direction when it comes to risk selection, for instance, is not doing us good in the mid to long term. So I think definitely it's also in our own interest to act very responsibly and not trying to use technology only for profit or margin maximization against our customers. That's not a good way, and I don't think it will succeed.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, for me personally, it cannot be just a contradiction between commercial tasks and moral, because, for me as a person, and why I chose to work in this company is that, values matter, morale matters, universal values matter, although it sounds a bit like, you cannot touch it. But at the moment of crisis, this is very clear and obvious how different companies act on this. And I totally agree with Alex, so not repeat what he said, but it's our task as management, as people that are shaping this industry, to work with a moral compass. Otherwise, who else than us will do this?
Yeah, no, I completely see that. And it's an interesting, so I'm kind of very lucky, obviously I work across a lot of industries, and insurance is a really interesting industry because of the themes that we've already talked about, which is that pull between innovation and change versus stability and trust and so on. It must be quite a difficult industry in which to prioritize and think about what, to your point, Sirma, what to do, right? And to be clear, I'm a data scientist, so I think one of the biggest pitfalls in this area is that we just go and brilliantly solve the wrong problem, right? And it happens all the time, right? Just because you can do something, you can use that AI, etc. How you actually integrate that to support, I guess, new business models that a client is going to really appreciate and kind of work with is kind of critical, right? So I'd like to get a sense of that. When there are so many things that you can do. You mentioned large language models, right? We haven't mentioned ChatGPT yet. It's 10 o'clock, right? So, there's so many things that you can go and invest in and go and try. So within that kind of environment, how do you guide conversations about prioritization and which thing to invest in and the kind of timeline of investment, given that by the end of the investment, it might be something else that we can try? I'd love to get a sense of that kind of prioritization conversation, if I may. I'm not sure who would like to start with that.
I can give it a try. So yes is the answer. No, so I think there's really a lot of technologies around, a lot of technologies doing the same things, by the way, or sometimes do the same things or almost the same. What I do is it sounds very basic, but focus on the user experience, customer experience. So commercial insurance, if we focus on the user experience, so meaning the business users, so the department and so on, then it will impact the customer experience. Because let's take, for example, the certificates, right? Insurance certificates. It takes ages in your company to build them. The customer is asking for them. You have so many processes and so on. So if you can streamline that, suddenly you streamline the user experience because they just have to click a button and it's done. It's kind of automating that process. But then the customer receive it faster and anytime. So you look at those processes. And then you look at what technologies can be applied. So again, I was back to my use case, defining use cases. I'm not really I'm a fan of tech, right? But I'm not really a fan of taking the tech and trying to apply it to my company. It's the other way around. What is the purpose? How does that fit into it? And we talk about ChatGPT and all these technologies. Yes, that's why my answer is yes. Yes, sure. If that fits, it's not like it's part of the ecosystem. It's part of a global topics. We're talking about blockchain 3 years ago, a metaverse, there's always something new, but it's kind of looking at the way of working, you're impacting with RPA, robotic process automation. Yes, it has an impact. Everybody thought, okay, it will steal my job. Well, it doesn't steal the job, it just help with your life, it helps you with your work, streamline your work. So it's really looking at those kind of things that can fit into the technology. But it's true, there are so many technologies that it's very difficult to find the right one that would fit your processes.
Yeah, it's similar to us. Let me add, say, our perspective, and then it's a group perspective, so it might change business unit to business unit, but the question was about how do you prioritize, and again, I'm sorry for quoting Sirma, but it's about balance. It's about balance. And there's
every time it's 10 euros, I think, every time. I think
exactly, I've finished them, I think. No, but there's a lot of tension. It's a trade-off. It's not easy. There's different parts of the organization that are pulling in different directions. For us, the compass is the strategic plan. So the moment where we decide what's a priority for the next 3-5 year cycle is the strategic plan definition. And in the last one, which we presented 1.5 years ago, it was about, 80-20 approach. The 80 is the sort of fundamentals, the no regret moves, and it's about infrastructure, operations, which is a lot about what Conrad said before, the automation, the data-driven organization, etc., and the customer-facing, customer interaction, and customer experience. The rest of the 20%, and say, unfortunately for me, given the job I do, but the investments are not exactly 80-20, as you can imagine, is on the most innovative stuff. And in the most innovative stuff, let's say, sort of layered. We have the Horizon 1 stuff, which is more in the hands of business units. We are a pretty federated group, so we'll let, let's say, the countries decide what's most important for them given their targets and their priorities. But on the Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 is where, as the central team steps in. And my feeling here is that typically we need to push a lot. So it's personal feeling on insurance, and I don't know if it's shared. Compared, for example, to banking. Let me elaborate on this. Banking, when I was working as a consultant for banks, had a very clear burning platform. The commission margin was needed to go up because the interest margin was going down. There was a lot of push on automation, etc. So either they changed or they would haven't survived the wave. Insurance, I don't see that burning platform clearly today. As has been said before, it's a very solid industry. It's been solid through the crisis. It's resilient. Risk is, rising. So my feeling is that on Horizon 2 and 3, we need to push, actually. I don't see that moral hazard of doing too much stuff and taking too much risk. It's actually the opposite. Like, there's so much layers and overlays that are stopping us from being innovative that we really have to go around and push people and, maybe develop POCs and MVPs and show something concrete, because otherwise the concept is not ready to be digested from business units. So, and another 10 euro for Sirma, I was in Lehman, and you mentioned it, no? In September 15, 2008, and I was in Canary Wharf with my box going out of the building. I don't see that risk in insurance, in all honesty, at least not in any of the big incumbents. The risk I see is that there's a bit of, and again, prove me wrong, please, here, there's a bit of too much self-complacency. I mean, we take pride of our stability and capability of resisting and living through crisis and being innovative, because in all honesty, I mean, if we have been around 191 years, I mean, it means we have innovated ourselves, otherwise we won't be around. But there's gonna be some things, and I'm really worried about this ChatGPT and generative AI that will prove us hard. And here is, I think the real challenge is, are we capable of, embracing the point that Google quote was making, is that we need to move a bit quicker than our customers. Customers are already there, and we're still thinking, does it make sense, what it is, etc. So I'm a bit worried that this time we might be a bit too slow.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I think it's an interesting points that you're making around. I mean, to the first point, you're never going to add value in businesses by walking around the business with an AI-shaped hammer, looking to hit stuff. Right? You just don't do it that way, right? And I think that's where sometimes maybe the labels and the things of this gets in the way, because ultimately, if we put ChatGPT or AI and so on into a box for a second and think about, to your point, what we're trying to achieve, right? Actually, what we're trying to, we're just trying to build leaner, smarter, more engaging, more sustainable businesses, right? And these are just enablers to allow us to do that. And I'm reminded of there's a book called Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? Has anyone heard of that one? Or Does It Make the Boat? Something like that. Will It Make the Boat Go Faster? And it was written by, please correct me if I get this completely wrong, it was written by, I think, one of the guys from the British Olympic rowing team. And he talked about how it was all about small marginal gains, but the thing that really helped them was having that core set of, we know exactly our purpose, to your point, Sirma, right? We know our purpose, we know what we're trying to achieve. And it feels to me that success in innovation, particularly in these kind of crazy times, is only successful, or is as successful as the strength of your core purpose in terms of how you actually create that campus, it feels. Alexander, did you want to come in on the prioritization point?
So first of all, I think it's a lot about taxonomy, because typically, people believe innovation is something that is at the forefront of things, while as a matter of fact, 90% of all innovation happens very close to your core business. And that's honestly what we need to foster and what we need to encourage, because that is where the real values are, and the value is generated, and also for our customer, the value is generated. So, but that being said, I think we see we're in interesting times, because what we're currently seeing is that really breakthrough and disruptive innovations are now accessible in their applications to many, many people. So we have a socialization of some innovations that we have never seen before. At the same time, this shifts away, or this makes innovation accessible to more people, and therefore it is not only contingent on having, a couple of good data analysts and they're doing the job. It's now really everybody in the company can start to innovate with new disruptive technology. And I think that's the real game changer that I personally, maybe somebody else here in the room, has not fully grasped what that really means and how we are organizing ourselves around it. So a couple of months, half a year ago, I would have said, easy peasy, 90% core to the business. We have another 10% that we need to make sure that, we're doing POCs, we have different technologies that are, a little bit further away, others are more closer to our business and are more able to be dealt with very short term, and then you stage it over a couple of horizons, and then, we have a very stringent approach. I see this changing. And it will be quite fascinating to see how this is going to play out over the next, 1 to 2 years. Because the socialization or mutualization of innovation with new technologies is a different ballgame.
I completely see that. So we've got a few more questions, but we do have some audience questions. So this is through the app, which I'll try and ask. So the first question is around, and I guess got more questions than kind of time at this point, but given that we're all industry leaders and we've been working for many years in this kind of innovative area, if you like, what's really new? So the question is, what's really new in the last, say, 5 years? Sirma, I guess that you mentioned a lot of the factors and a lot of the things that have changed, right? I suppose that's maybe it's that resiliency that is kind of, the thing that we've had to kind of really stay close to, right? But in your viewpoint, what's really changed in the last 5 years?
Maybe from a tech standpoint, right?
Yeah, I think it's from a tech standpoint of the question, yeah.
Yeah, and I think probably back to what Alexander said. What I see is that I mentioned a bit earlier the business working closely with the technology and the IT. What I see is that the business is really appropriating the technology. So if you look at low code, RPA, all these tools, they start to develop themselves. I was talking about this pocket of agile teams. Well, business is able now to develop themselves automation, digitalization for their own processes, I think. And therefore it goes much faster and also much more tailored to their need. So it's not like IT is coming with a solution, hey, we'll implement this, it'll take a year and a half, and then you have the solution in a year and a half. And then by that time, by the way, the business case is over. So it's really like the business taking over the technology. And I think when I was saying, fitting the technology to the use case also, and that's also why we're here in the InsurTech, also us to bring the technology to them and say, hey, this is the art of possible. If you think about the smartphone, nobody needed the smartphone, but now everybody needs a smartphone, right? So the customer doesn't know what they need till you show them, and that's part of the story. One side is them defining, and the other side is us bringing the solution to them so they can develop their own solutions.
Yeah, it's a good point actually about the iPhone. I think is a story that's used quite a lot, right? It's a really good conversation piece, and I think that many years ago, I think it was Ford that was quoted. I'm not quite sure he is correctly about if I delivered what people asked for, I'd delivered faster horses and so on. I think one of the things I've seen, over the last 5 years has been around that. You're right, that bridge with business, and I think the hardest conversation for me is I still see people go into business and say, what do you want to do with data? What do you want to do with AI? What should we do with ChatGPT? I think you end up in the wrong conversation because you can either, well, firstly, it's an unfair question, right? But secondly, you can constrain the conversation so quickly. So getting to a point where you understand what does this stuff really mean, and therefore what does that enable, and having a good conversation about that becomes really, really crucial. Right? So,
but if I may, I believe what happened or what is new in the past 5 years was actually the change of the mindset. And we started to talk and act much more towards the customer interests. We remember 5 years ago only we were talking about risk, selling products, this, that, and now we are talking about being obsessed about the customer with the right purpose to secure their future. And this is actually driving many of the changes of the industry. I also believe that actually the coming of InsurTech companies that are very powerful and innovating is actually encouraging and giving an additional stimulus to the incumbents to move further and to progress for the right goals of the industry. And actually what is new is that the whole environment is not predictable anymore. Let's imagine, let's be clear that we are not going to work anymore in an environment that is stable and that, we can predict for the next 10 years. We are going to be living and working in an environment that that is extremely volatile, at least in the next several years. So many things changed, but I believe that really the mindset of this industry has been changing in a very fast pace.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Another question, which I think is a really good one as well. The question is, how far does the panel feel insurers should go to help customers manage their risks, e.g. flood, cyber? And I think it comes back to your point earlier, Sirma, in your presentation about kind of health insurance and so on. And I've seen it in lots of industries as well, where almost like the perimeter of your remit is changing, right? So within the insurance industry, how far do you think our remit goes and extends in those areas?
Simple, maybe banal answer, as far as possible. I mean, any risk is let's say in theory, an insurable risk. It depends on the price, always. And it depends on the data that you have in order to get there. So sometimes you need new sources of data. Some other times you need to take calculated bets because maybe you don't have enough data history. But I would say that no risk is by definition under not insurable. So I mean we need to push ourselves in order to extend the boundary as much as possible always. And oftentimes the answer is not going alone.
I'm a strong believer of prevention and helping our clients to avoid acute situations, and not only in healthcare industry. Imagine for a second, if I believe that many of you have friends or relatives that have diabetes, for example, and some insurance company just avoid taking the risk of this. But I believe that if they have the right lifestyle, actually they're even better risk than many of us. And what is our task in terms of home insurance? I believe it's not about, repairing your window when storm comes only, because this is also a part of our topic. But it's about, reminding the owners of the homes that, well, maybe you need to check your pipes, or we are ready to help you to check your pipes, or the health of the battery of your electric vehicle, etc. So I really believe that our task as an insurance industry is to support our clients, not to get to acute situations. And for sure, if they have the acute situation, we are here to help them.
If I can just bounce back on the prevention, I totally agree. I think we going toward this more advisory area, advisory experts. If I take the cyber insurance in France, we do insure the cyber insurance, basic risk. And as you said, Stefano, it's difficult to assess because there's not a lot of historical data, But what we do also, we have a risk engineering team that is helping to prevent and assessing the security, the IT security, IT landscape of the company, so they can really prevent this cyber attack. And then it goes hand in hand, so you could say, well, if it's fully prevented, you don't need to sell a cyber risk insurance. Well, yes and no, because it goes together, right? But it's really going toward that direction, prevention of the risk before it's happening.
So I would like to add maybe one thing, and I think on top, prevention pretty clear, and it fosters open platforms, because we cannot do it alone, because we need to really think full end to end in each of the risk journeys, so to speak, of our customers. However, I think we also need to be mindful of the areas that we're not adequately covering today. So let's take NatCat, for instance. Natural catastrophes are on the rise. The severity is increasing of the individual events. So the answer cannot be that we're just reducing our own risk exposure. Let's take chronic diseases, for instance. In many of our health insurance today, this is an exclusion criteria. Do we have answers how we make it insurable? Cyber, there is a capacity shortage overall in the market. We could probably grow much further, but there is a systemic risk that we have to control. So I think we also need to some extent find new answers to these newly emerging risks, and to make sure that we are also offering solutions for all our potential customers. And that's also a question of inclusion in the end, right? So we also have a lot of people in societies, also in our mature markets, in Europe, that are really risked of being able still to afford insurance. And we see that divergence in many of our mature economies driving that process, and we need to find answers for that. So I think prevention can be one of the things, making risks more controllable. But I also do see, at least for myself, that we have a responsibility to find answers for the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, Alexander. In terms, just looking at the kind of the questions on the app, one of the questions about regulation, I know we've kind of like touched on in our conversations before. So I'm not going to ask the exact question here because it's specific, but generally in terms of regulation, then within this kind of fast-moving environment, what is the role, or what do you see the role of regulation as being in terms of being able to kind of govern and help and support and protect clients within this fast-changing environment, if you like? So have you got any thoughts on how we can work with regulators, or what we need perhaps from regulators to make sure that we are delivering the right things for our customers?
I'm happy to pass this.
Okay. I'm Bulgarian, I'm brave. As I said, I really believe that frameworks and structures can be liberating because this allows us to risk in a safe environment. And, we can complain about regulations, but I believe, it's very important to make sure that we work together with the different regulators in the different countries or institutions to make this industry really sustainable. And I don't mind when, they put strict rules, because it allows us actually, to work in an environment which is allowing us also to protect the customers, to make sure that we put the key frameworks and conditions for this, and it's a joint work. We should not over-regulate, but we should not also push for really radical liberalization, because we see now what is happening in certain areas of the banking industry. So as I said, a good balance, it's important, but it's our joint work as an insurance industry to work with the regulators of building the right construction that is allowing us to develop the industry in a sustainable manner. Oh, come on.
So, I mean, no, I don't want to shy away. So, I would see two things here, and just adding what was said, because I fully subscribe to what Sirma said. First, I think we need a level playing field. So we really recognize sometimes that from a regulatory point of view, we're not necessarily always being treated in the same way. And just give you an example, if you look at the new European discussion on the European level in terms of regulation and data accessibility, for instance, in cars, it is very important for us as insurer that we have access to those data. And it needs to be the same then for the OEMs and the auto manufacturers themselves. And this is not an easy discussion sometimes. Yeah? So it might be a bit surprising for you and unexpected, but that's a discussion that's currently ongoing. The second is, I think it needs to be also very reasonable. So it doesn't make sense to base regulation on a basis of unrealistic assumption what a certain region in the world can or cannot deliver from a technological standpoint. And so I think, for instance, in Europe, we have to be very mindful that for a certain period of time, we will depend on hyperscalers in our basic technologies, no matter what. And that, I think that this has to be taken into account and be taken into consideration. On the other hand, I fully subscribe, liberalism is not the answer. We need to be very responsible with everything we're doing, and I think the regulator has a very important role to be very clear about it, but also very open-minded in the discussion. So everybody should be heard, because this is a democratic process. And I do believe it is important that also we as large insurers have a clear voice in all the discussions with all the relevant parties. And that would be, my kind of my requirements to a good regulation. Then all the rest, honestly, will be an implication of this democratic process, which I firmly trust into.
Can I add, because I don't want to abstain from answering the question. It was a joke. But it's a joke because of the ChatGPT story, and you've seen the Italian privacy regulator, how it reacted. So this created a bit of turmoil, of course, in Italy. and I'm based in Italy despite having a global role. But 3 things about the regulators. First one is we need to thank them. I think as an industry, if we are around solid as we are, and look at Silicon Valley Bank or others, it's because of regulation. So regulators are at the same time, our break in some cases, but also our bless, I think, sincerely. The second point is we have the responsibility to push and guide them. Because if we sit back and complain, nothing will happen. The point is that things are happening so quick that we don't even understand them. How, can we first understand them and then push them to react? Sometimes they react or overreact too quickly before we even understood it. And that's when we have issues. And the third thing is that there's bodies, and one we are pretty, as many of you know, pretty active on is Geneva Association, for example, that are bodies where you study things and you sit all together and you try to shape this PPP so that, you push things in the direction. So it goes back a bit on the point of our responsibility. So we need to take it really actively and feel the responsibility and not just saying regulators are there to block us, because first of all, it's sometimes good, and secondly, there's ways to shape the future.
Great. I know we've only got a few minutes left, so I wonder if we could just finish off by maybe just quickly touching on so what do we do? All right. We've heard from Conrad about, how important it is to predict the future. We've heard from Sirma in terms of that kind of looking forward and how things change so rapidly. In the context of all this and involving, landscape, how do you think about strategy? Because I think we can all agree if someone said to you, hey, can you create me a 10-year digital strategy? I'm not quite sure what you put in that these days. Things will be different. There we go. I just wonder, in terms of, if we've all got to go away and think about how we apply this over the coming years, do you have any advice or any thoughts about, how you approach that given the change that's going on? I'm not sure who wants to start that.
I can give a try again as first when opening the doors. But so very quickly, so we are driven by shareholders, right? Shareholder value and share price and so on. So we do have this 3-year strategic cycle at the group level. Then we try to apply this to the entity in different business units. What I take this strategy and I split them, because if I tell to my people, to my teams, hey, in 3 years you'll have to get there, it's a super long time, right? 3 years is too long. So I chunk them into year time, and then year time, then I chunk them in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. Okay, 3 months, I want to have this and this and this. And you're kind of building blocks, like a Lego house, you're building things. And then at the end, you have you want to have a villa with a swimming pool. In the end, you have a villa, maybe you miss the swimming pool, but you have a nice villa. And it's chunk things, and that's how you can also make your strategy more agile, if I may say, so at least you can adapt to new things that might come in the way. So after 3 months, you get there's new thing coming in. Okay, do you need to revisit your strategy? Do you need to adjust? That's how I would go. That's how I go with my teams. But there's no silver bullet there.
And I just want to finish off with just almost out of time. So maybe some quick points on advice looking forward.
So I'll be also short, picking up on what was said. I do believe a strategy in a very uncertain world has 3 components. First one is a clear purpose. Second is clear values, and we need to be very strict on them. And third, the only organizational answer today for a very uncertain world is being agile end-to-end and organize yourself with all these rituals around it, including the business. That's really a journey for us. But when I was CEO in Germany for 5.5 years, we structured the whole organization fully in a tribe organization at scale, and it really made a difference. I do firmly believe that's the organizational answer to some of the strategic questions that we cannot answer today, given the uncertainty that we're living in.
I tend to avoid giving advice. My kids are already grown up, and I learned that, any advice is something that is not the right thing to do. But what I believe is important is, to keep the customer in the heart of everything that we are doing, because this is very important. Protect the legacy and the best out of the legacy that we have. On the other hand, go above and beyond, considering that we are good people. and innovate with a strong moral compass.
And I cannot agree more. I think, I mean, you closed, Rick, with a $1 million question, because this is a really difficult one. But I think compass is fundamental. Whatever it is for each of our companies, you need to know where you want to go, what's your purpose, what's your main reason for being around. And secondly is sort of keeping flexible and agile. I totally agree with what has been said before. It's impossible to predict the future. So just to make an example, in Generali, we were about to launch a pretty big project about Insurance 2030. So we said, how it's going to look like, it was 1 year ago, how it's going to look like in 10 years' time, 8 years' time, technically, the insurance sector. We're not doing it. We're not doing it anymore. It's worthless. But whilst planning is, invaluable, plans are worthless. Worthless. So this means that we don't have to stop planning. We need to do planning. We need to play scenarios, as has been said before, a lot, and then keep flexible. And the moral compass will tell you more or less where to go and adjust day by day, because it's changing so quick.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Great conversations. I've just got a little quote here. So it was Heraclitus who said that change is the only constant in life. He also said that if you step in the same river twice, you're not stepping in the same river because of flow. Sometimes it feels like that river's flowing quite fast right now, but it sounds like having a strong moral compass, strong, set of purposes, and thinking about where insurance comes from really gives us that kind of that foundation stone, if you like. So. On that note, let's stop there. And I just want to say a big thank you to our panelists, and we can give them a big round of applause, please.